Hey friends, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to the third video in our 6-part series on how to build a marketplace with no-code tools. Now, in the previous two videos, we started off by going over how you can use Webflow to build a basic landing page for your marketplace platform and how you can get customers reaching out to you before your platform's even built. The video before this was the video on how you can use Airtable to build the back end of your marketplace platform. It will essentially become your single source of truth that will basically process all of the information and data that runs through your marketplace business. And in this video today, we're going to be jumping into the third tool, which is make.com, which will allow you to automate your business workflows. So in this video, we're going to be going over, first of all, why I chose make.com. If you've done any research into the automation space, you'll know that there are already a whole bunch of other automation tools out there. Make.com, in my opinion, is the best one, and so I'm going to be going over why. Then we're going to be doing a quick little automation 101. We're going to go over two key concepts that you need to understand that will allow you to pretty much use any automation tool that's out there. Then we're going to be going over some specific examples that you can start implementing today that will allow you to start taking some of those manual processes in your marketplace and automate them. Then we're going to be going over a quick example of how I automate the talent user journey. So whenever freelancers sign up to the Unicorn Factory, how I use automation to make sure that the output that I'm generating for them and the experience that I'm creating for applicants is good. And then finally, I'm going to give you some assignments for after this video where you're going to be able to go out and build on top of the previous work that you've done with your landing page and your database. Okay, we've got a lot to cover. Let's dive into the first part, which is why I chose make.com. So the automation tool that I'm currently using to power the Unicorn Factory is a tool called make.com. Now, some other tools that are quite known in the automation space are, first of all, Zapier, which is probably the most prominent one. This is actually the automation tool that I used at the beginning as well. And then there's a new one that has emerged as being quite popular called N8N, which is basically an open source version of something like make.com or Zapier. Now, first of all, I want to say straight off the bat that any of these tools are going to help you automate your business. Really, the main difference between them isn't as big that I would say that I would completely disregard one over the other. However, I did choose make.com for a few reasons. Number one, I have found that, compared to Zapier, Make actually just gives you best value for money. I think that when you have a look at what it is that Make allows you to build at certain price points, you actually just get to build quite a lot of things. The next thing that I like about Make.com, especially when comparing it to Zapier, is just how the interface builder works. So in Zapier, you have more of a linear approach to automation, but if you've ever set up workflows, you'll know that you'll have paths and conditions and certain types of use cases where your automation path might change. And whilst Zapier has made some inroads on this, they've now implemented things like paths, which make it a lot more intuitive, a lot easier. I still feel like Make just does this a bit better than everyone else. So overall, I'd say that Make, just from a functionality and pricing perspective, is quite good. Now, I do still want to mention a slightly more technical, but definitely cheaper version of something like make.com or Zapier, and that is N8N. Now, N8N, I'm not even sure how long they've been around for. However, what I have learned about N8N is that especially within the Glide community, it's a super popular automation tool. And the main reason for that is that whilst you can use N8N the way that we would use make.com and you just pay whatever your monthly fee is, you can actually copy your own instance of N8N and basically self-host it, which makes the entire app significantly cheaper. And so if you are slightly more technical, you understand how open source software works, and you just want to save the dollars, then I think using a tool like N8N is a good option. However, I do think that if you're just getting started in the automation space and you're looking for something reliable that you'll be able to scale up quite a bit, then you can absolutely not go wrong with Make. Okay, next, if you are brand new to automation, the way that automation tools work is actually pretty simple, and I actually touched on this in a previous video. There are two elements to every automation. One is a trigger, and then you have an action. So a trigger is essentially the event that kickstarts a workflow. So in this particular case, I've got a workflow that sends all of my newsletter signups and book notes to an Airtable base. And so the trigger of the workflow in question is when a form is submitted, okay? And as soon as this event happens and it is triggered inside of a tool like make.com, we can continue on by adding actions, which is really the logic or the automation part of our workflow. And so in this case, what I'm saying is, okay, whenever a new form is submitted and then I connect it, I say create an entry into my newsletter table inside of booknotes.ai with the email address that was submitted in the previous step. And so you can see here that you'll be able to reference data that was identified within the trigger in future steps. Now, the beautiful thing about this is that this is the simplest example of how you would set up a workflow. But once you go and have a look at some of the more complex workflows, you'll actually be able to see what the actual power is of an automation tool like make.com. One of the most popular workflows is the Airtable to Webflow setup, where you can automatically create landing pages using make.com. Now, this here is a breakdown of how my create or update profile workflow works on the Unicorn Factory. And I actually go into more detail in it in the landing page engine course in case you want to learn more about it. And I'll dive into a few more details about that later on. But essentially what I'm doing here is I've created an automated process of what I would otherwise have to do manually. Now, just to focus on the key components of it, we have here what's called a webhook, which is basically a manual trigger. But this is started from inside of Airtable. So whenever I approve a new freelancer, it just goes ahead, triggers a workflow, and then starts all of the different actions involved in setting up this workflow. And so to just walk you through how it works, it's the the webhook triggers, it then retrieves the record from my Airtable base that started this workflow. And so what I'm doing here is I'm going to my Airtable base, I'm referencing my freelancers table, and then I am using the record ID that was passed through with the webhook event. And then as soon as that happens, I have a router step that basically checks the status of the freelancer who just triggered the webhook. And so what it does is it basically says, hey, if the status of the freelancer in question is active profile, then go down this path, otherwise go down this path. Now, with some of the AI tools that are available now, you can actually also optimize profiles, and this is actually what's happening in this step here. So what I'm doing is I'm taking all of the information from the previous step, and I am now going ahead and automatically generating optimized content. So for example, the about section or the bio section gets converted to the right format. I also do some formatting on some of my URLs that are before they're sent to Webflow. And then as soon as all of that is submitted, we go through the process of creating the body of information that gets sent to the Webflow CMS. And so that's what it looks like here. And so what it does is it says, hey, if this person already exists inside of the Webflow CMS, then create a profile. Otherwise, go ahead and update it. And then there are a few additional steps. For example, if a new profile is created for a freelancer, it will send them a confirmation email, and it will also send a notification in my Slack channel. Now, this here is, I'll probably say, medium advanced in terms of workflows that you set up. There are some slightly advanced parts with, JSON passes and all that kind of stuff. But really, the key thing that we're looking at here is just how you can turn a manual process into an automated one. And so prior to setting up these workflows, whenever a freelancer would be approved, I'd actually have to jump into the Webflow CMS myself and add all of the data. With a workflow like this, it now does all of that for me. And it also allows me to send confirmation emails, and it allows me to basically standardize my processes, which one is a huge time saver as a whole, but two, also allows me to, make sure that the value or the experience that I'm delivering to my customers is consistent. Okay, now you might be wondering where to get started with your automation journey if you are brand new to this. Now, if you are working on a marketplace and you followed along to the previous 2 videos, you'll know that we sent up a landing page that looks a little bit like this, where we basically go ahead and basically tell people what our marketplace is about. And then we set up a simple call to action where a potential customer can fill out their details to basically let us know, what that is that they're looking for. So what we're going to do is we're going to take any of these form submissions and we're going to send this to our Airtable base. And so what I'm going to do is before I submit it, I'm just going to go ahead and fill out this form. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to jump into Airtable and make sure that our fields are set up correctly. So you can see here I've got a table for clients. This is hopefully something you did in the previous video. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to take any information that is submitted and we're going to simply store it in here. Now, here's how we set up this workflow. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create a new scenario inside of make.com. And then in here, we're going to start off by defining our trigger. So the trigger that starts this workflow is when a client fills out our contact form. So we need to think about what the app is. And the app where the form is submitted is Webflow. So that's what we're going to do. Now, you're going to see that there are a whole bunch of different triggers available to you. When it comes to form submissions, the one that we're going to want to use is the watch events trigger. Now, from here, what we can do is we can simply connect a webhook. Now, if you haven't done so already, you would have to click on add and then basically state what site you're connecting. Actually, let me just show you. I'm just going to call this a legal link. And you'll just have to connect your Webflow account. But then from here, what you can do is you can simply jump in here. You can select your site, and then you can select the trigger type, which in our case is going to be a form submission. So what we're saying here is, hey, whenever a form is submitted, I want you to trigger this workflow and pass through all of the data with the form submission. And so here's how we can test it. Once you've got this set up, just hit the play button. And then what we'll do is we'll go to our site and we'll simply hit the submit button. Now, what this will do is it will submit it. And then once submitted, we should see the information submitted inside of make.com. And so you can see here, it has passed through the information. If I expand the data field, you'll see that all the information that was submitted in the form is now available to me. And I can now take this information and define my first action. So the action that I want to trigger is to create a record inside of Airtable. Now, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to connect your Airtable account. I'm just going to go ahead, select this one, and then you just go and search for your base. Now, in the last video, we talked about what a base is. It's basically the overarching name of your app. And once that happens, you'll be able to select your table. And so the table that we're going to be using is the clients table, because that's where we want to store this information. And then it's going to pull up all of the different fields within that table, and now we can start mapping our values from the Webflow trigger into this Airtable step. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to map our email address. Then the status that we're going to select is just going to be to do, because we still need to review it. The first name field gets mapped. The last name field gets mapped. The company name gets mapped. Now, when it comes to the source, we're actually just going to dynamically populate it with the source value, and the budget, we're going to dynamically populate with the budget field. And then we're going to also select the message field. So it's all mapped up like that. Now, a special tip when you are sending data to Airtable, just enable smart links when you're using drop-down fields, which means that essentially if one of the drop-down options inside of your Webflow form doesn't exist in Airtable yet, it will automatically create them for you. Okay, now that we have this, we've essentially got our trigger and we've got our action. So what we are expecting to happen when we fill out our form is that it automatically populates all of our data. So how do we test this? So once again, we're going to first of all hit the play button, which initiates it. Later on, we can actually just turn it on and it will just run without us having to manually hit the play button. But then what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our form and we're going to once again fill out all the details. So we're going to jump in here. I'm going to select my source, my location. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to say this is another test. Then we're going to hit the submit button. Now, typically this would redirect to the scheduling page, but I just don't have it in here right now. And now, if we go and have a look inside of Airtable, you'll see that all of the information was automatically passed through, which means that we've now essentially set up our first workflow. Now, we can expand on this workflow in so many different ways. For example, we could say, have a look at the budget field that was set. And depending on what the budget is, we might want to create certain types of events. So for example, let's say if the budget is in the lower categories, we'll just send ourselves a Slack notification. But if it's in the higher categories, we will generate a draft email that we can send to that particular customer. So this is how it would work. We'll go in here and would select flow control. And then in the flow control section, we'd select the router. Now the router will essentially create two paths for you where you can then basically set a condition that determines whether or not it will go down one path or the other. And the way it works is we just jump in here and we say, hey, if the budget, and then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to say is not equal to, and then I'm just going to go in here, I'm going to say 5K to 10K. So then we're just going to go ahead and we'll say low budget. Then go down that path, and you can see now that it's got a filter selected, and that filter basically says, hey, if the budget field is not equal to 5K to 10K, then go down the other path. On the other hand, we also want to set a budget here, and we'll say a large budget. And what we're saying is, hey, if the budget field is equal to, and then we'll put in our value, and it is case sensitive, and you need to make sure that it's spelled the exact same way, otherwise it won't work. Then we've got it down here. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say, hey, send a Slack notification. So once again, you can just connect your your Slack account, and then just go ahead and manually set up a Slack notification. Or alternatively, we can say, hey, I want you to create a draft email. And what we can do is we can say, hey, when someone has a large budget, you can basically take the email address of the person that submitted the form. And then in here, you can say, let's schedule a call, and you can from here essentially create a dynamic email. So you could say something along the lines of, hey, and then we'll put in a dynamic value for the first name. So, hey Connor, thanks so much for posting on Legal Link. I would love to jump on a call with you to discuss your needs. Here's my Cal link. And so, I mean, from here, you can kind of just add like a URL or whatever it is. But the key thing is just make it work within your workflows. It really depends on what it is that you're trying to do. But the key thing that I'm trying to show here is that you can actually dynamically populate content into emails. And then one last thing that we'll do is we'll also just clone this, and we will also send ourselves a Slack notification when that happens. And so this is really like the first step to automating your workflow. You're creating an entry in your CRM. You're getting a notification so you know as soon as you receive an inquiry, and then in certain conditions, you can use paths and conditional logic to add additional steps like creating a draft reply email. Now, before we dive into the assignment for the week for you, if you want to learn about more advanced automations and how you can also include some AI tools like OpenAI, then head on over to the MVMP Labs, and I'll leave it a link in the description down below. And in there, I have got a course with 9 lessons. It's about 4.5 hours worth of content where I walk you through the step-by-step process of using Webflow, Airtable, and Make.com, and also OpenAI to create thousands of landing pages. And so in this lesson 4, we're actually going to be going over the workflow for setting up automations inside of make.com that will allow you to automatically generate landing pages inside of Webflow. Now, you'll get access to some scripts. There'll be some step-by-step instructions on how it all works. But more importantly, you'll also get access to a JSON file, which is called a blueprint, that you'll be able to use to automatically upload the workflow that I just showed you into your make.com account. So all you'll need to do is just come in here, and then you'll just go into import blueprint, choose file, and then in here you'll be able to go ahead and simply select your blueprint, and it will automatically rebuild what I created for you, and you'll then be able to implement it directly into your make.com account so that you'll be able to speed up that process for creating landing pages real fast. That and more. There are a whole bunch of additional courses and additional resources for you to get up to speed with some of the main no-code tools that I use in order to run the Unicorn Factory and some of my other projects. So if you're interested, check out the link down below. With that being said, let's dive into the last part, which is the first workflow that I'd recommend setting up if I were you. Now, if you are like me right now, your client database is probably going to look a little bit bare. The secret to getting customers to use your marketplace is to simply let people know about them. So one of the first things that I recommend people do when they are just starting their marketplace journey is to build a system for customer outreach. And so what I recommend doing here is to start off by going out and sourcing different types of businesses. Now, there are ways to automate this, but I think for the first 10 to 20 potential customers that you want to work with, I would just do this manually. And what I would do is I'd look up different businesses that might want to use your services. I'd find out who the main point of contact is, and I'd simply fill out this form here. The next step that I would then do is I would jump into make.com and I would set up a workflow for automatically for dynamically reaching out to people in your database. This is the exact system that I used. So let me quickly get rid of this. This is the exact system that I used to, kickstart all of my marketplace platforms. Ultimately, you're going to have to set up workflows to basically, let people know what you're up to. And so the way it works is you first of all set a trigger to basically pull all of the records that you want to reach out to, or in this case all of the customers that you want to reach out to. You can then use something like OpenAI to automatically create a draft email, but you don't need to use OpenAI. You can also just create a template where you can then dynamically populate it with the first and last name of the person, and then you can just go ahead, create a draft email. Now, as soon as you've got a process for sourcing potential customers and a process for potentially reaching out to them, you'll see that you'll just get a lot more traction simply because people are finding out about what you're doing. So for you, a big focus is going to be to set up the form workflow that I showed you earlier in this video, and then also to start implementing systems and workflows inside of make.com for finding and sourcing companies that might want to work with you in your platform, and then also a workflow for reaching out to them. This is really the starting point of it all. Once you've played around with it, you'll become a lot more familiar with automation tools, and you can really take things further and make things more advanced. But ultimately, the key is to really just get the hang of how these tools work so that you can really then start taking some of the tasks that you're doing manually and automating them. So I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please let me know in the comments down below. Also, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Other than that, I'll see you back in the next one. Bye.